everyone. This is Corine Lafont, your favorite radio host, your only radio host, and favorite girl, of course. Broadcasting to you from the lovely island of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean on Between the Lines. And you know how we do it here on Between the Lines, always with gratitude, or like I say, thankfulness. I am thankful that I'm looking darker than ever today. I am so thankful. I am so thankful that I'm looking darker than ever today. I am so thankful that it's overcast outside. There's a lot of rain. People in neighboring communities are saying it's raining, pouring, cats and dogs. I've never seen that literally, but if that's what they say, I'm going with it. It's not here where I live yet, but I could see it coming. I could see it coming. Okay. And so, why does my screen look like it's flashing? Why? I mean, it looks like it's thunder and lightning happening in my space. What's going on here? Anyway. Oh, it's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day, people. And I look beautiful, don't I? And I have a handsome man with me don't I tell you people, it's only handsome people on my show. If you're not handsome, don't message me. That's just what it is. Douglas Weissman. Did I pronounce your name properly?
You did. Perfect.
Beautiful. And you look like it's snowing where by you. Nice little thing. I should get my own little
Well,
scarf.
I'm definitely jealous of the almost rain. I live in the Los Angeles area, so I over exaggerate how cold it might be to other people. But to me, it was cold this morning. Now it's actually pleasant, but I kept the scarf on. Fashion.
Of course. We're all about that. I'm dark chocolate and you have your scarf on. We're working it today. We're
Right.
working it today. People, what are we talking about? We're talking about a novel life. A novel life. And that can be interpreted in multiple ways. A novel life. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Douglas, just a little, and then go into the discussion. Okay? Let me see. So, Douglas Weissman is a graduate of the Masters of Fine Arts program in creative writing at the University of San Francisco and lives in Los Angeles, like he said a while ago, with his gorgeous wife. Aren't we jealous? He said, gorgeous wife, fun loving daughter. You see the descriptions he's using. You can tell he's a writer, right? Anxious dog. Clearly, he needs therapy. And indifferent cat. He needs therapy. By the time you read this, he says he will probably have another cat. So clearly, we need to ask that as a first question. His novel, Life Between Seconds, was released on November 15th, just the other day. Congratulations, Douglas.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And do you have another cat?
I have been able to stem that tide, but I think it's because we have a couple neighborhood cats. So it allows me a little extra time.
Okay, then. I don't know what that means, but okay, we'll run with that.
It means
So,
I just, whenever a neighborhood cat runs by, I'm like, look at the cat. And they forget that they want another cat in the house.
oh, oh, okay then. So clearly there's crazy going on in your house
Oh,
from the
yeah.
gorgeous,
Animals,
from
the
the
better. That's the theory. We have squirrels, we have cats. There's probably a raccoon hiding somewhere.
yeah, yeah. I remember the first time, I shouldn't say the first time seeing a squirrel, because I've seen squirrels here. Not really squirrels. It's not a popular thing in the Caribbean, in Trinidad. It's more like a pet people have. But I saw one when I was in the States. Where was I? Atlanta. And I saw him outside my window. I was just so excited to see a squirrel.
Yeah.
So excited. And he had this little thing in his hand fiddling with, and he just looked so cute. He just looked cute. But I don't want them near me. From a distance, I'll give you love. I'll give you love from a distance.
Oh,
Okay.
that was my university. When I was there, the squirrels were rampant and they would steal chips or any type of food directly from your hand. They were
What?
they were
They're
fearless.
bold.
Yes. They were brazen really about it.
Okay, thanks for telling me. I'll know
Yeah.
not to
So
ever
just
return to
there.
Atlanta. So a novel life, and you can tell from the bio that I've read that he has a master's of finance in creative writing. However, he has a spin on a novel life. The thing about it is that it is also novel. How do you explain that, Douglas? Novel in terms of the book, but novel in terms of what am I saying?
Well, you're saying that it's something a little different, something interesting, something out of the ordinary, but at the same time fits within the perspective of what we would perceive as kind of on the straight and narrow, right? So I'm not going out and I'm not an astronaut. I'm not
yet.
not
Not
yet.
yet.
That would be amazing. But I have been able to spin my life in a little bit of a different way while fitting into the fabric of society.
Yes. Novel. So you see, we're using the word novel in multiple ways. And here's the thing, the way the discussion is going to go. Once Douglas is, in agreement with it. Now, back in the day, not too long ago, having a master's in finance was like, what the hell are you doing? What is that? What can you do with that? You're supposed to be talking medicine, lawyers, maybe a teacher or a nurse or something like that. A master's in finance, what are you going to do? Paint and draw your way to success? What are you going to do? And kind of leapfrog into 2022 and beyond, and especially 2022 after the pandemic. People are looking for people who are writers, content creation people. This is what it is, because nobody wants to write. Even if they may have the know-how, they don't want to spend the time doing that. And there's a special skill that Douglas could go into in terms of writing. Now, I too am an author and I'm a publisher, so I have the knack. I don't have a master's in fine arts like Douglas, but I'm a fine woman. So I have a master's in being a fine woman. And so that translates to writing, doesn't it, Douglas?
Absolutely.
Right. And so what the angle that we want to go with, Douglas, is how relevant is having a master's of fine arts now? How relevant, and what sort of writing capacity that people could be looking at in terms of segmenting themselves? If they're listening to us now and say, hey, I'm a good writer, I could write. I always wanted to pursue probably a degree or a master's in writing, but of course my parents was not with it. Now that I'm listening to somebody who has it, there is potential. I could start my own business. I can. Tell us your story. Tell us your journey. Was your parents in keeping with you doing a master's in finance? And help us move towards where you are now, and how, what are some tips that you can share with persons who are listening and may be listening to help them feel empowered and inspired to want to pursue this for probably not only personal, but income generating possibilities?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start with the part about my parents. And so maybe not the best storytelling technique, but the reason my parents were completely on board with me getting a master in fine arts was because it settled me down in one space for a period of time. Because I lived in Florence for a year when I was in college and traveled around Europe. And then when I finished college, I traveled around the world for a year. And then I came back to Los Angeles for about 6 months, and then decided to go to South America for about 5-6 months. And I was applying to graduate programs at the time. And the big thing was, when I was applying, I think my parents were gung-ho because if I got in, it meant I was there for at least the 2.5 years that the program required. And so it allowed me to be close to them. Even if I wasn't in the same city, they at least knew, okay, I'm in San Francisco, which is a 5-hour drive or a 45-minute flight, and it's easy enough to get to me, and they know that I'm safe. But my journey really started in about 2nd grade when I realized I had this big connection to storytelling, and I wrote this story about the happily ever after of Cinderella. And it was just kind of poking fun at the idea, and it was so...
No, Douglas. You brought Cinderella. You brought Cinderella in your story. Are you sure about this? You're touching on a stable story there, Douglas.
Yeah,
don't interfere with Cinderella.
Well,
what did you do with her?
Even at the time, I knew that the intellectual property of Cinderella was going to get people's interest. So even in 2nd grade, I took Cinderella because everybody knew who she was. And my teacher
What age is 2nd grade? Let us just
grade,
be clear.
About 7 or 8 years old. I think it was 8 years old. Yeah.
And you knew Cinderella that well enough to be able to...
I mean, the Disney version. And so I drew the pictures. I wrote maybe a sentence or two of each page. My teacher loved it, or thought it was so funny that she had me read it in front of the class. And ever since then, I just had this understanding of my connection with storytelling and my love of storytelling. And even when I tried to disassociate with that because I thought there wasn't going to be any money in it, or there wasn't going to be a career
Right?
based upon what other people said, not what I said, not what my parents said either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly my point. People back in the day, it was like, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah. And still it's there. Even though I've carved out this tremendous career for myself so far, and I just turned 36 in March. So I'm not even mid-level really. But at the same time, I've been able to do it because I understood taking these different avenues, never really going and knocking on the front door, but climbing through the window if I had to get where I needed to be or wanted to be. And that's how I came, excuse me, that's how I ended up focusing on, actually, I focused on Italian literature and language at university and undergrad, but I had a minor in creative writing. Then when I realized I couldn't escape the writing, I loved it too much. I loved the storytelling possibilities. And when I was traveling, that's what I focused on. I would meet people. I would learn stories. I would create new stories. I would make connections and new stories with these people. And I wanted to share it. And when I was at the end of my graduate program, my MFA, I found a list on a posting on Craigslist asking for people who've been to certain places. And I'd been to all the places, and I sent in a sample. It was like a paragraph or two, but it was from a blog I was keeping. And I wasn't trying to monetize the blog at the time. I was just trying to keep my family posted. And
Douglas, do you see what happened there?
Yeah.
Do you see what happened there? All the little escapades you did with your crazy young self, from interfering with Cinderella and going all over the place. It just happened to culminate in an opportunity and led you to Craigslist for whatever reason. What are you doing there? You understand what I'm saying?
This was 2013.
Craigslist. That's not far.
It was just the other day, but Craigslist has become something very different since then. It was a viable place to find work at the time. Now there's other websites that other people post, or broader perspectives, more legitimate. I don't want to say Craigslist is not legitimate, but just places.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Focus on getting you hired, right? Where Craigslist was still had gems there, and now it's a little different. But you're right. I mean, I would say that when you said interfered with Cinderella, I think that's how I have lived my career. I interfere in places, and it just works out.
You put yourself in there. Douglas.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, I climbed through the back window, and it works out for me. With travel writing, it's a career that people dream of, but it's also something people don't necessarily understand the concept of. And I'll give you the secret to travel writing, great travel writing right now. Anybody watching now or in the future, it's not about where you are. It's about the experience you have when you're there. And that's the key. No one's going to care what you see, because 20 million people have seen, that's just a made up number, but have seen the Colosseum, right? So it's not about, I went to the Colosseum, then I went to the Roman Forum, then I went to the Vatican museums. That's not what the story is about. The story is about what happened while you were at the Colosseum that makes it unique to you. And because it's unique to you, all of a sudden it becomes universal to everybody reading.
That's interesting. So don't make it about you. I saw this, me, I, which is what a lot of people tend to do. I see this on LinkedIn. It's upsetting and it's nauseating. You know, you're on social media and everything is about, oh, me, see me here. And they post themselves, the perpetual selfies, Douglas. Oh my word. The post has nothing to do with them, but there's a selfie. I'm like, what? Really?
Absolutely. You know? Absolutely. I mean, I try not to post, I don't really post selfies of me anywhere, just because I don't think I take good photos of myself, but I'm usually taking photos of other people.
Right. But it's not about you. It's not about you.
Yeah. But that's
it's about adding value.
That's the storytelling idea, is that when you make it personal, not so much about you, but just your experience and the individuality of your experience, then it somehow becomes about everyone else.
That's the amazing thing. Yeah, because it's the experience. Somebody can go in that same spot and say, I read Douglas had an experience here. I wonder if I may have the same, or probably they would, or they might have a different experience. And they connect with you and say, hey, I ate at that same restaurant and my experience was totally different.
Oh yeah.
Or probably I met the same chef. He's still working here after all these years, and whatever, so it creates an opportunity for engagement, Douglas, as
Yeah.
opposed to making it about you. It's about what happened that everybody can share in that same space. But when it's focused on you, you can't share in the you, in the me, in the I. The experience is such a bigger, more neutral space that everybody can partake in. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how the storytelling comes about. I mean, it starts with a sentence, and anybody who can write a good sentence, which is surprisingly few nowadays. But I've taught creative writing since 2017, and it all starts with that idea. If you can write a good
Yes.
sentence, then your foot's already in the door, because
Yeah.
it's one sentence built upon another sentence creates a paragraph and then a page. But beyond that, it's the storytelling technique. One sentence leads to another, and you're creating a story. And when you create the story, you create the experience. When you create the experience, you're creating the connection, and the connection is what keeps people there. And that's what the business is. The business is connection.
Yeah. And that's where I was going to. So I'm glad you went there, because people write stuff, articles, blogs, posts on LinkedIn, so, Facebook and all these different places. But they find it's not converting. And I'm like, it's dead in the water because you're not engaging. It's coming from a place of, I'm pushing myself on you, as opposed to trying to understand your audience, engaging with them, using certain words that resonate with them. Again, it is coming from a place of, it's not about you. What is it that the audience would be interested in hearing? What is it that they would want to continue a discussion about, that you can put a call to action or something there, or even a picture, and say, what do you think of this? You might even have to use words. You just put a picture and let the picture speak. Because if we're talking fine arts, I come from an art background in terms of fine art, painting and drawing. And you go to a gallery. What do you think a gallery does? There are no words. It's paintings on the wall. And people walk around and you see them standing up, gazing into this thing. Somebody comes stand next to them, and next thing you know, a conversation starts. It's like, do you see that? And next thing you know, a story is building just from two people having a discussion, watching and staring into a painting, which is just an image, So it's what draws people in. And coming to the business side of it, Douglas, how is it everybody can do this? You just mentioned not everybody could write one sentence. So I guess you're probably saying no, but
well, no, I mean, I believe anybody can do it. It's just that the realization out there is that not everybody currently can write a good sentence. And that's people who are, college educated or not. I mean, it's across the board. It's not saying this type of person. It's just knowing that what's out there, there's a lot of bad sentences, but knowing how to write a good one, and you can learn how to write a good one. It's not complicated. You just have to learn how to do it. You have to understand what comes in. And I'm a big believer in the idea that you have to know the rules so you could break them, right? Because I have made every mistake when it comes to my writing. I've done the terrible thing of sending out the same query across two people without doing my due diligence. I've done the thing where I've cut and copied and pasted and let it be known that I'm sending a mass email to important people. And I've cut corners, but in those moments, I learned from my mistakes.
Of course.
And that's the important thing. And so I've grown from that, but that's how I learned the rules that I need to follow and what are the important ones, but then also why breaking these rules are both important to me in my writing and to the business that I promote. So when other people are writing about the top restaurants to visit in a city, I'm not, because one, it's done before, and two, I know that that's going to change in a year. And while it might give other people more opportunity to then kind of recycle a similar content idea, I prefer to dig a little deeper because that's just where my preferences lie. And again, make that connection, make that engagement, create that engagement. And you don't need a master of fine arts to do that. It just really propelled my knowledge.
Yeah.
What I could have learned in 10 years or 15 years, I learned in 2.5. And that helped me grow. And after 2.5 years, then I took another big trip to celebrate. And my parents were like, well, I guess that's just the way it is. So, so I
They're
went
like,
out.
that's Douglas. That's
Yeah,
Douglas.
exactly. That's just
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
could do.
yeah.
And I went out and I did about 5 months in sub-Saharan Africa traveling around. But all these things,
Isn't
again,
that the life,
yeah,
Douglas?
it filtered into my career. It gave me more to write about.
Yeah.
It established more, again, global connections with people that
Oh,
I stay
yes.
in contact with,
Yeah.
stories. And this is where my connection, my feeling, my passions lie, in those stories, in those connections. And I want to build that and share that. And that's also why, or how, I came up with the idea of my latest novel, Life Between Seconds, is from the traveling, from the experience, from learning about an issue that arose in a specific part of the world that I would not have known of otherwise. And it really inspired this broader story mixed in with my own experience along the way.
As you mentioned that, let me bring up your website. Let me do that quickly here to showcase your work. Here we go. I'm sharing the screen, if it would allow me to do so.
It's all about what technology allows. So
right? Don't fight it. Resistance. Don't fight it. So while we are going through this, where is your book now? Tell us, where is your book? Where can
I actually have, if you click the menu, there's a landing page, just Life Between Seconds.
Yes, here it is. Life Between Seconds. And isn't it like that? It's every second, right? We have to live in the moment.
It's one of the reasons I'm so attracted to your show title, actually, Between the Lines.
Yes, Between the Lines, isn't it? I noticed that, Douglas. You're quick on the ball. Yes, Between the Lines. This is awesome. But here's the thing. Don't you think that people should just leave well alone? If you know you're not a good writer, it makes no sense fighting up to learn. Just leave well alone and just hire somebody to do it for you.
Well, that's the thing. I actually think that if you feel like you're a bad writer, it's all about understanding the value of your time, right? Time and energy are two things that we either consider a lot or don't consider at all, but they're really intertwined. And so if you don't have the energy to become a good writer, or you don't have the time to become a good writer or better your writing, then hire somebody. And it's going to help you. It's going to help other people because you're hiring them. And you have the benefit of good writing at the end, which will affect your company or brand. And on top of that, what people don't seem to realize or connect with is, you look at your website, that's all copy. So that's writing. You look at your newsletter, that's all copy. That's writing. You look at the way that you maybe send out a fax, a memo.
Fax still around?
I know they are in the law industry, or the law field, but I don't know. But just this concept of every time you might not realize, but every time you have to write something, that is writing content, that's writing copy. And it's important to understand why it matters, because that's what people engage with. If your company's on social media, or you're on social media trying to promote your brand or your product, and as you mentioned, you're not engaging, or you're not finding why people are just overlooking what you're putting out there, it's because it's content that might not be resonating. Maybe you're not hitting the right notes, or maybe you need to find somebody who understands the best practices, the best things to do. And there's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where I prefer to be.
Yes, me too.
I know a lot of people that love Instagram or Facebook. And there's
TikTok.
so many out there. TikTok, And I'm on these places, but LinkedIn is where I really feel connected to
professional community.
Exactly. And the communications that they're talking about, the way that they share information, I think is what hits. And I try to share that information in that same space about writing. And there's a lot of people who focus on just the social categories. It'll tell you, especially on LinkedIn, it's like, hit these points, right? It's like, one, tell them what your product does let me rephrase. Reiterate their pain points. Then
That's right.
reiterate those points
Exactly.
again, then explain what your product does and how it
How
helps
it. Mhm,
those pain points, right? And
yeah,
that's what you're doing. You're generating value because you're saying, I understand your pain. I've been there, and I you can trust me because I understand your pain and that I've been there. And what I did was create this thing to help me in these aspects, and that will then help you. So you're saving
yeah,
time or money,
yeah,
or it's helping you do this. And that's how I feel about storytelling. Yeah,
yeah.
it's not selling a physical product. It's
Hmm.
selling the understanding of connection, of building bridges, of
Yeah,
how to
yeah.
build an arc so people pay attention.
I love that. And the thing about it is, it's so difficult to quantify that
Yeah.
because it's a soft skill and it's hard to put numbers to that. That sort of, how does it convert? You know, it's kind of hard. So when people are asking, what sort of tangible evidence do you have? I mean, what's the most can you really say? I mean, people liked it, people engage with the content. Probably if there was a link, somebody click on it
Yeah.
and probably made a purchase if you have that kind of CRM set up, you know. Um, but yeah, you know, it's more about, and you know, the funny thing about writing, there are some people who remain quiet in the background. Some, you have the bold ones who will actually probably take action and engage, but there are people who are always watching and reading and listening. You cannot you know, ignore those persons who are not as bold and forthcoming as the other persons. And probably the majority of people are like that. They will read something, they will think about it, meditate, and they keep it there to themselves. They might not necessarily come forward. So you can't assume that it's not working all the time. You know, there may be little tweaks that you can make, but I think and I know there are people always watching. There are people always reading. They mightn't say anything. They're just not like that, you know, but they're there, you know.
Absolutely. And then there's the idea that what's the adage? Proof is in the pudding, right? It's the
Mm,
idea is more about what are they putting out there in terms
mm-hmm,
of even on the back end, right? Like maybe they wrote a
mm-hmm,
book, or maybe they have succeeded as ghostwriters, but
mm-hmm,
they're not active on social media, or they're
mm-hmm.
not sitting there promoting on podcasts or
Yeah,
on webinars. And that's still valuable and effective, and it's showing their experience and their knowledge, even though they're kind of sitting back and absorbing, as opposed to being part of that
yeah,
loud, noisy conversation. I mean, social
for
media is such a
sure.
void, and
It is. Oh
right,
my
trying to get
word.
heard is one of the most impossible tasks, but it's necessary depending on what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. And it's
Yeah.
also now more than ever. I mean, 5 years ago it felt a little different, but now more than ever, people are responding more to authenticity, right?
Oh
It's
yes.
but it's at the same time, it's interesting because it's for smaller brands in which they want the authenticity, right? It's like
Yeah.
Nike's going to be Nike, Coca-Cola is going to be Coca-Cola, and they don't expect them
Yeah.
to be authentic when they post something on social media. But
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you have a small company of 5 or 10 people
Yeah.
and you're trying to push a product, they
Yeah.
want you to be authentic as opposed to being
But
Coca-Cola or
but
Nike.
what I think if Coca-Cola decides to be authentic and Nike decides to be authentic, wouldn't
Right.
that change the whole dynamic?
Well, it's also the question of would people feel that's disingenuous?
Oh,
Right.
good
And that's
point.
what happens when a large company like that tries to be
Yeah.
authentic, they
Yeah.
might come across as disingenuous. There's a fine line that you have
Yeah.
to balance.
Between the lines,
See,
the
there you go.
seconds.
And
There's
that's
a
what it looks
line.
like. I was having this conversation the other day actually with someone. They were at a social gathering, and somebody commented, they're like, "Oh, you're a writer?" And my friend was like, "Yeah." And this person said, what's the point? Like what's the
What,
purpose of that? Where
what do you
and
what do
in a
you
sense, it was a lot of like tech people, and
oh
it was this idea of like, oh, well, tech is where the money's at, or tech, or as you mentioned,
oh, is
law,
that
nursing,
right?
these like tangible ideas or
Mm-hmm.
tangible concepts of where we think
Mm-hmm.
professionalism is. So the tech industry, the law,
Yes.
finances. But
Yes.
but when you zoom out, and again, looking at what I mentioned earlier about newsletters or social media, but even more beyond that, look at TV. Look at TV series and movies, right? The way that we gather our media and the stories that we tell, people
Of
forget that you
course.
need writers to write these things. And without writers, storytellers, you're not going to have the streaming platforms, and you're not going to have the cable TV that's still out there, and like even reality TV that people love is still shaped by writers, and
Of course.
producers still have scripted areas of those shows, like, oh, well, we're still going to stand over here, or they're going to block things for it, even if the words that the people directly say in those aren't written out specifically.
I have on my LinkedIn profile the banner image. Facts tell, stories sell.
Yep,
You
100%.
cannot go wrong. Stories sell. So while the tech people, and we're not trying to make them feel any less, everybody's on the same space. You are telling facts and numbers and all those things, but the stories is what lives on.
No,
And it's not
100%.
and it's not that the stories are made up. It is
Right.
actual experiences that people can resonate with. People see themselves in the stories.
That's
I
the thing.
can see Douglas in that. Oh, Sandra next door. Or my
Yep.
son. Or you see yourself in that. And it's like you're in there.
Yeah,
You're in there,
that's exactly it. That's
Mhm.
I there's a quote. I'm a little hesitant to quote it because I'm pretty sure it was Stalin who said it. So it's like I don't want to give him any homage, but at the same time, it rings true, that idea of like 5 million people is a statistic, one person is a story. So the idea that it's, and I probably butchered the quote, but still it's the idea that,
Mhm.
and this comes to me because I'm Jewish. Uh, I've been heavily connected to my Jewish community throughout my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the Holocaust has always rung really
Yeah,
large in my family and
of course.
family, friends, connections, these things. But it's when you hear the number 6 million, it's such a
Yeah,
intangible concept. It's a stat that you can't really understand how big that is. But
yeah.
then I meet somebody, one person, they tell me their story, and you cannot forget it. You cannot
No.
forget the way that they tell you how it smelled, or how
Yeah.
cold it was, or
You
what
were
they,
there. You were
yeah.
there.
And it gives you a sense of empathy and understanding because you are now in those shoes
Yeah.
as much as you could be, right? But
Yeah.
it creates a far more dynamic, interesting, and unforgettable moment than just saying 6 million, because it's
It's
impossible.
bonding. It's
Yeah.
bonding, Douglas. You take that story and just, you see what you just did? You just shared a story that somebody shared with you, with me.
Hmm.
It creates a bonding because it impacted you so much. You shared it with me. Then I will meet somebody and said, I had Douglas on my show and he shared a story with me. And stories is something that just keeps building, going on and impacting somebody else's life. Facts can't do that.
You're right.
Facts can't do that. They're
Yeah.
just bland. They're just there. I mean, they serve a purpose, but stories, mm-mm, mm-mm. This is what caused traditions. This is what your grandparents and great grandparents did. The stories that you sit by in the night listening, just like how you're drinking your cup of tea or whatever, or rum in there. I know it's rum in there, Douglas. Yeah. And you listen to the stories because
Yeah,
this is what keeps you engaged. The stories.
exactly. And that's really how I came about understanding my love of storytelling. As you said,
Mhm.
my grandparents, my great grandparents,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
father, my mother telling me stories about my great grandparents, hearing the stories about how they came to America. I mean, that
Oh
kind of
yeah,
essential American dream type story
yeah, yeah.
mixed in with the pogroms in Eastern Europe at the time. So there's that sense of despair
Adversity.
and exactly
Yes.
overcoming it. And
Yeah.
I always love this part of my great grandfather feeling so guilty about sneaking into America that he snuck back out to Ellis Island so he can come back in legally. So,
Because it's with conscience. He's like,
yeah,
I did this thing wrong, so I need to redo it.
right. But that's something that connects me to him, that gives me a
Yeah,
part of him that I would never have understood.
yeah,
I
yeah,
understand this person more because of that one action he did.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
again comes back to storytelling. And it's
Oh
also the
yeah.
reason why there's such a huge drive for, as I mentioned, tech companies earlier. There's such a huge
Yeah.
drive in tech companies to find people who can translate those statistics into
That
a story.
that is the thing, Douglas. I am seeing countless like ads and requests for writers to translate, break it down, take this information and make it digestible,
Yeah.
consumable for somebody to understand, the layman, anybody to understand, because they can't do it. A tech person could only speak tech. They cannot speak in the language we speak.
Yeah.
you know You know,
Yeah.
because when I talk to some people, I'm like, hold up, speak English, speak English. And they'd be like, I am speaking English. No, you're not. No, you're not.
Right.
Speaking,
They're speaking code, like tech
right?
code, computer code.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Speak so I can understand. You know. Oh my God. Douglas, this is awesome. And you know, the possibilities are endless
Yeah.
to persons who want to get into the field. You're into travel writing. I am into nonfiction writing. And a lot of other things. You know, I consider myself a brand journalist because I came from a journalism background. So I am able to, I write in a conversational style. That's my
Mhm.
style. So when you're reading it, it's like you're talking with me. It's like I felt, because people even say it to me, Corine, I heard your voice. It's like I'm having a conversation with
I
you.
love that. I love that. You
Yeah,
can't. You're like penetrating people's minds, and
I am.
it's a
I
great. It's
am.
great.
Yeah, I am. And people tell me that in my conversations too. They're like, Corine, you forced me to think. You forced me to think.
How
And
dare you?
yeah, right? I get in there. I get in there. Yeah, but this is good. You know, so when they read it, it's like they're talking to me. It's like they're sitting there in the same space. They can actually see, feel, touch. All the senses are engaged. You know, all the senses and more are engaged because I force them to think beyond a certain point that they would have been comfortable with. So I challenge their thoughts. I disrupt what they already know and
Mm,
challenge them to
I love
think,
that.
you know, like, yeah, I
I
challenge
love that.
them.
I also love that you mentioned the senses because
Yeah.
that's another place that I feel people writers fall down often. New
Oh,
writers more than most, but still writers in general, they focus so much on trying
mm,
to build this sense of place, and they're only
mm.
saying, the wall was green or the sun was
Ew,
yellow, but they're not
ew.
telling you how you feel. As you say, it should be a sensory
Yes,
experience, and the fact like smell is the strongest sense
yeah,
connected to memory that we have. So
yes,
by giving a scent, you actually are building that experience more, or by giving
yes,
sound, you're building that experience more, and people
yes,
can usually build the picture around the
of
smaller details
course.
that you give, right? So if you give, say, a small definition of a room or a small description of a room by giving two details plus a sound plus a smell, and all of a sudden they're just going to build an understanding of that space on that alone.
Do you know, just like when they say, if somebody mentioned the word lemons or limes, your mouth
Mhm.
starts
Yeah,
salivating,
my mouth is
just
yeah,
yeah, automatically,
yeah,
because it translates in your body. So if I start describing a certain experience, you already start to feel it. It could be tension, it could be the whole emotional roller coaster, vexation, trauma. I could make you go through that if I want to, depending on what, or joy or bliss.
yeah.
You know, I could make you go through that. But this has been awesome, Douglas. What you're doing is fabulous. Keep leaving your parents and traveling the world. Keep hopping and skipping, sharing your experiences because people need it. You know, books and things of the written world helps people to live vicariously. Some people are not able to leave from where they are, and through the work that you do, or even I do, it helps them to come out of that space and be able to live a life that they probably would never ever live. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for bringing credence to the degrees that you have done, the work that you have done, the studies that you have done, and now it has taken prominence in the world, you know, that people can pay attention, sit up and pay attention and realize, hey, this is something I can do. And all the things that your parents, grandparents, or society, your church, your school, your teachers would have looked down on, these are the same fields that are now moving past the traditional sort of vocations that people would have done before. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for being on Between the Lines. Any final words before you go?
Yeah, I would love for people to just tell more stories, tell their stories, or find
Mhm.
how their stories can create new stories. If they don't want to be so
Yeah,
personal as to put their name on it in a way, they
yeah,
put it through fiction. And I think that people will underestimate how valuable their own experiences are or the stories that they want to tell.
awesome. Thank you so much, Douglas.
Thank you for having me. You're such a delight. This has been so much
Thank you. Of course. Feel free to join me anytime. Hey.
fun.
And say hi to the next cat that passed by.